All right, so as David was explaining, we're going to talk a little bit about interacting with Wikipedia in a classroom format. And the idea, the big picture, was that we wanted to help students disseminate knowledge to a diverse and interested readership. And what I'm going to share with you today is essentially the first pancake. So I've done this for one semester, and I would not consider myself an expert in running this type of class, but I can tell you what doesn't work and share a few gems of what did actually engage the students for the semester project. So again, what the plan is for today is to talk about ways, really to inspire you to think of ways that you can try to get a readership for your students' work, because the bottom line message is that when they felt like someone else was reading their work besides the professor, they seemed to lean in a little bit further. That's the idea of what we'll talk about today. So I assume most of you have heard of Wikipedia. It is a free online encyclopedia. It's free to use, it's free to edit, it's free of advertisements, and as David mentioned, it is probably the first thing that pops up when you put in a search. And so it is widely accessed. And there are 5 pillars to Wikipedia. It has a neutral point of view, and that's similar, not the same as what we do in scientific writing, but it at least gets students on that spectrum of thinking of trying to interpret data and talk about it in a way that isn't contriving the results. It's free content, and there's also an interesting piece that I didn't appreciate until we got into the project, and that's the interaction with other people that edit content. So I'm sure your own fields have their points of controversy. Nutrition, diet, and cancer, as you can imagine, is a topic that gets people really emotional. And so trying to start that kind of relationship, that professional relationship of being respectful and civil when people are editing content. And even though they require that you're civil and respectful, there aren't a lot of firm rules, and Wikipedia is really, really large. So it is kind of a broad playground, and it takes a little bit to play nicely in the sandbox with others. So you may be wondering why Wikipedia. There's part of me that just likes to see the reaction on people's face when I say that we used Wikipedia in a classroom setting. And really the last bullet point plays to that part. So I've been teaching for just under a decade, and I remember quite vividly how important it was in the classroom to tell students you cannot use Wikipedia as a source for your information. So the students that we have now in graduate school kind of consider Wikipedia like forbidden fruit. And so when you open the door to Wikipedia, it seemed all the more appealing to get in there and modify the content so that it does have some reputable information. But as a scientist and as a teacher, I really see the need to train better communicators, especially with something as complex as cancer. The scientific understanding of cancer and also diet, they're 2 very complex sciences. And so to try to communicate that clearly really does take a skilled art form. And then again, having the students engaged in their work to a level beyond just getting a good grade, wanting that, trying to inspire them to put a little bit more effort into their writing, and not writing to me, but writing to people that really need to use that information. So bottom line, I really like to help students develop critical thinking skills. There's so much knowledge out there to be learned, but to guide them in their critical thinking and their research skills, to think about what information is missing, how reliable is the information that's already out there. And the process of editing and working with Wikipedia is very similar to what we ask our students to do for systematic literature reviews. And so I think that the skills can translate well. So beyond all of those kind of more academic reasons for engaging in a Wikipedia project, I just love the encyclopedia. So when I was a child, I would snuggle up in my parents' bed, and in their they had a water bed, and so in the headboard they had all the encyclopedias, and so I would just lay in the water bed and read encyclopedia after encyclopedia, and I didn't realize how expensive encyclopedias used to be, but they were, thousands of dollars, so it was really a luxury to have access to all that information. And of course, you can't use the encyclopedia when you're doing your scholarly works either. So Wikipedia really isn't all that different. It's just a way to go look up something that you know nothing about and come up to speed in a somewhat kind of educated way. So the other aspect is I really love the idea of Wikipedia, that it's free and that people have access to a broader knowledge. So the next piece is really, I attribute more of this knowledge to Sunny. So he's the one that really got me started and put the tools in my hands so that I could use Wikipedia in a logical way for a classroom format. So I met with Sunny prior to starting up the class, and he gave me the links to these guides. So there's two really basic guides. There's an instructor basic guide and then some case studies. And after reading through those guides, they're very easy to understand, very clear. There's lots of pictures and bolding. It's kind of a luxury to read that kind of literature instead of scientific papers. And it got me thinking about what would make sense for the format of the class. And so I followed the advice in trying to set up the syllabi and the guidelines. And two of the most important aspects from these guides, one is that if you're going to use Wikipedia, they need to start using it the very first day of class. It's kind of when you want an interactive classroom, people need to talk the first day of class to know that's the expectation. People need to get into Wikipedia the very first day of class, set up their user profile so that it isn't this looming obstacle towards the end of the semester. The other aspect is to really consider your class size. So what's reasonable for the level of engagement, what's the format of your class, and of course, with any good curriculum development, to keep your objectives in mind. So I thought I would share some ideas of how to use Wikipedia in classroom settings based on these reports, and then based on some of the ideas that I had that I ran by Sunny to think about what was actually realistic. So the first section is kind of the toes in the water aspect. So if you have a larger class, or if you feel uncomfortable with technology or Wikipedia in general, these early exercises might be a good way to get started. So the first one is to just copy edit existing articles so that students can get practice in learning how to write in a neutral voice, and they can learn by editing others' work. It's easier to see issues and errors in writing in other people's work rather than your own, because you get too intimately involved in your own. They can also get in and contribute sources. So David had mentioned that many of these expert articles are actually written by non-experts, people outside the field. So even if they did a fine job of writing the content, you can add some extra sources so that people know where the information came from, and add some extra credibility behind the statements. The third was to critically evaluate the state of current articles. So if you're really freaked out about students setting up user accounts and interacting with that kind of messy playground, this does not require any true interaction with Wikipedia. They can get in, print off the article, and then and do an assignment that's totally offline just for the classroom setting. And then I have the second section, which is the whole hog approach. And these are really involved exercises, but if knowing your discipline and the courses that you have already, you might think of ways that you can use Wikipedia. So writing a featured article, that would require a lot of time, and breaking it down to smaller steps so the students can really complete that. Some other professors have had students translate an article into another language. adding original photography to improve articles. So they can't be copywritten. They need to be original artwork. But if you're doing bench work and you have some really great pictures of molecules under the microscope or something like that, or a mechanism, that could add a lot to Wikipedia. Illustrating mechanisms or concepts, so not even messing around with the text, but actually helping with the visual learners and explaining concepts. And then, of course, you can create videos as well because it does catalog those in Wikipedia. So for my particular class, we conducted a gaps analysis project. So before I even engaged with Wikipedia, I already knew that I needed the students to go to the edge of diet and cancer research and think about where there are gaps in the field, and to research that and prepare an oral presentation. So they already needed to take very complex information and distill it into a 15-minute presentation. And then the idea was to take that presentation and distill it even more into a broader, non-scientific presentation of their gap analysis project. So what the students did is they took the information that they learned in presenting their oral presentation and then integrated content into Wikipedia. But to do that, Sunny gave me the foresight to have several steps before they get to that point. And that is really key information. They need to, like I said, interact with Wikipedia from day one. So we had them create a user account before they ever went in and edited anything. They had to complete some online training in how to engage in Wikipedia, to know the rules of play and how you interact with other people that are editing. Wikipedians is what they call them. And then we also included some very simple exercises so they could learn the many different ways to contribute. So just adding a reference somewhere or changing the grammar in a sentence or two, just so they could get in there and feel comfortable knowing that the work that they put in was going to be dispersed to the world. And as a scientist that toils over papers and the wording of my papers to the nth degree, I have to admit, the first time I went in and just added a reference, it was really kind of nerve-wracking to know that there wasn't any kind of peer review before it went out to the world. So, and it was just so simple. I just added a reference or changed a sentence, but I knew that I needed to do that to have some credibility in the classroom, to show that I was a user in Wikipedia, and then also to really understand what they were going to go through with the technicalities of it all. So the other aspect is with their training, they learn about what it means to have a high quality article in Wikipedia. And so again, clarity and neutral point of view are really important. And so this quote at the bottom is, imagine a world in which every single person on the planet is given free access to the sum of all human knowledge. And that's from the creator of Wikipedia. I really like the utopian view of it all. So there are some key policies. It's free content. You have to have reliable sources. And unlike writing in the sciences, they actually prefer secondary sources and tertiary sources rather than primary sources, because it's already been distilled before you distill the message even further for a non-scientific audience. The other aspects are to have a neutral point of view, and then good faith, that you have to trust other Wikipedians that are putting the effort to contribute content into it, that you need to be respectful of what they're putting in. So this is a part of the assignments that we did throughout the semester, and so this was the first week of class. They had to go in, create a Wikipedia account, add a few sentences about themselves. They could upload an original photo just to get used to that. I didn't require that they put a photo of themselves, so some people put like an animal or some sort of representation of themselves. And then they had to send me proof that they had actually engaged in Wikipedia. So they sent me a link to their user page, their username, and a screenshot of the Wikipedia Basics training. And then the next exercise that we had them do was to edit Wikipedia. And so they went in to an existing Wikipedia article related to the class. They brainstormed ways that they could improve that article. And then they were supposed to find 3 to 5 places that they could see the topic of their presentation fitting into Wikipedia. So another kind of nice thing about Wikipedia is, as research scientists, we think a lot about categorizing and filing. So Wikipedia is very similar, that there are some places that are kind of like dead ends and they're not linked to a lot, but there are others that are like an umbrella to a ton of knowledge. So finding those places that are high frequency hits and really contributing in those places. And then what they do is they practice adding 1 to 2 sentences of new information, back it up with a citation, and they utilize the information that they learned in their gap analysis project. And then the next phase was actually adding a big kind of bulk of content. So the kind of bottom line messages from their gap analysis project, and they had the option to create their own page if they wanted to, but most of the students chose to work within existing text and edit from there. And then I was concerned about how to get into Wikipedia and grade it, because if it is a high traffic area, people can go ahead and change. So the student could make something and somebody could edit it right away. So again, with Sunny's help, he shared a format from a class that he had taught of trying to get the paper from Wikipedia into a paper that I could actually grade, and showing the edits that they've made along the way. And that did make my life a lot easier when it came down to sitting down and grading, that I didn't have to go all through the web to find all the places that they had contributed. And then the last piece was the reflective essay, because I knew that the students would want to complain somewhere, and I didn't want it to show up in their paper. So I gave them the venting paper, which is the reflective paper, to tell me how much they really disliked the exercise and the torture that I put them through. But then to also try to draw out what it was about the project that they might have enjoyed in hindsight after surviving. So we'll start with the good things. So I have a little picture of a girl dressed up as an angel. So some of the feedback on the assignment really stopped me in my tracks, because I knew that they were struggling with the technical aspects of the project all along the semester, and I was trying to help them along the way. But they kept a very positive attitude. And then at the end, these are different quotes from people in the class. So instead of seeing this Wikipedia assignment as a task or a requirement for the class, it made me consider it as an obligation to collaborate by improving data. Another one simply wrote, "I'm grateful for this project." Another student wrote, "I think it is important to portray information to a non-scientific audience, especially as a health professional who is interested in research on human subjects." And then yet another student wrote, "I really like the big picture idea. Once you have learned something, you need to tell the world about it. Keeping it to yourself does nothing to help society, and I cannot think of any other way besides Wikipedia of telling the world in a class setting." And in our conversations throughout the semester, it really did become clear that the students were happy to be able to go back and contribute to the forbidden Wikipedia. They had, when we talked about the assignment at the beginning, I mean, I almost heard an audible gasp of, "You want us to use Wikipedia in the classroom?" I wouldn't have thought of that. That just sounds just wrong. So then this is the flip side. This is the, I have the silhouette of the devil here. So the feedback was the technical pieces were challenging. So I was turned off by the technical learning curve of the Wikipedia assignment. When completing the actual contribution, I felt that I wanted the easy way, or one sentence contribution that reduced the possibilities of hitting tech glitches. And I could see that in what they contributed. Nobody chose to put a new article out there. That was just, that exposed too much of themselves, and it required too much work. So they went in and edited other people's work. And then a suggestion that we talked about at the end of class was having sessions within our classroom where everyone brings their laptop and they do some of the pieces together. I had some students that were very adept with the technical pieces of Wikipedia, and they're like, what's the big deal? It's really easy. And others that felt very intimidated by it. And so trying to facilitate those collaborations outside the classroom were challenging, whereas if I just would have brought that inside the classroom and troubleshot just right there, I think that would have been beneficial. So again, the take-home messages, early exercises are a critical component of the assignment. I really think that more peer interaction would have benefited those that were struggling with any of the technical aspects. Another piece was, in hindsight, I probably should have created a list of articles to edit instead of such an open-ended contribution. I didn't want to pigeonhole anyone, but I think it was too broad, and Diet and Cancer Field is pretty large. And then another aspect is I was really pushing them to be on the cutting edge, but to suit Wikipedia, it probably would have been better to choose topics that were more well-established, because if they're more well-established, it's easier to understand and portray that in a simpler, non-scientific way. And then I had just one student that chose a slightly controversial topic, and we didn't have any interaction problems, but I think in hindsight I probably should have steered her further away from that content, just to again, have some foresight and prevent any kind of issues with interactions with the environment. So Sunny, wearing his Google glasses here in this picture, contributed so much. So I would not have been able to do this in a methodical way without his help and his foresight in planning the assignments. And that's all I have. So we have a few minutes here for questions. Yes?
You said you were editing the citations. Were they adding resources?
Yes.
What were they linking to, like an abstract of a paper or like a different web page?
You can use either one. Most of the resources or the sources that we would add would be secondary kind of lit review type papers to add a little more substance to the statements made.
Yeah. Another question was, did you have students, were they anonymous on Wikipedia?
They could be, but most of them chose to just be themselves. Yep. Great question. Your username can be kind of nondescript, but your user page has to have your real information, but what's public can be kind of anonymous. Any other questions?
So do you think they'll go back and having at least dipped their toe in, go back and try something in the future if they're, once they get deeper into the field?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So it's really time consuming. I think it depends on the student. So those that are going into academic medicine, I kind of doubt it. But those that might be going more towards teaching or public policy, I think it makes sense because you do reach a very broad audience. Yeah, great questions.
I'll just make one other comment. I like the way that they have to practice using civil, language and practicing their communication skills and writing, and that is really important in the work they're going to be doing with patients. So good for you for thinking of that.
Yeah, well, it was something that I didn't realize until I started going through the tutorials. So Wikipedia thought of that more than me. But once we got into it and we read some of the user comments together, there are lots of examples of not so civil behavior and civil behavior that it led to a great conversation. Yeah, over here.
So how were you able to grade these institutions? You said Sunny had helped you throughout a week to do it. How did you do the grading?
So Sunny had a rubric already from a class that he had taught in the summer, and then I adapted it based on what our course objectives were. But the key piece that made it much easier to grade was they copied and pasted in what they contributed to Wikipedia into a paper, and then explained what it had been before, what gap was missing, and then how they improved it. And that way I was able to just read one document rather than clicking all around Wikipedia, trying to figure out if somebody had modified what they had put in. So they were able to snap, freeze time for me in that one paper so that I could read it. And of course the reflective essay, it was more of a just, you need to write it and you'll get completion points. And I could tell from the reflective essay that they needed that to dump in kind of all their harsh feelings towards the technical pieces, and then also step back and think about what they had learned, because when you're in the trenches, you can't really appreciate that. Yeah. Oh, wow, all of a sudden, lots of questions. So you've asked some already. Nina?
What level of students per day?
Yeah, that's a great question. So most were PhD students. I had 2 master's level students. And I think that made a big difference too.
I think it might be, I have used some Wikipedia and like entry level technical degree, but with a different take on methods, but I think this is good. So I was just wondering what level of students are using that.
Yeah, and the PhD level students have a lot more confidence about getting their work out there. They're kind of chomping at the bit, they want to get out and teach. Yes?
Her question is related to mine. You mentioned systematic review of the literature, and I wonder if, being PhD students, they would have the ability to scrutinize the evidence in terms of the level of evidence.
Right.
From number 1 to the highest level to the lowest level.
Right.
And therefore include evidences from primary literature that are of the highest level in their review of the literature. So like you, I would be satisfied with the fact that most of your students were PhD students.
Yeah.
Because you do need that level of competency to be able to reliably write a summary of what you read in the literature and disseminate it in Wikipedia. But you do need some kind of reliability and accuracy of the evidences that you cite and that through that forum. So
Yeah. But it is important to keep in mind that with Wikipedia, they try to steer you away from citing primary literature. So you're oftentimes, much like when you read if you read the encyclopedia as a kid, like I did, when you read that encyclopedia, you knew that it was at least 3 to 4 years outdated, because they have to write information that is really well accepted. And so Wikipedia is very similar, that they don't actually want really cutting edge. They want knowledge that is known and accepted. And so the systematic reviews are oftentimes what you evaluate to write the Wikipedia. It's kind of a spectrum of knowledge that it kind of gets distilled down to the non-scientific audience.
yeah, I agree with you that systematic reviews would be the ideal sources of information for Wikipedia.
Yes,
But
yes.
still, the systematic reviews will have to be from a respected
Right.
source too.
Right.
And my question to you then is, are you going to make it a requirement in that course to say that PhD students are required, or whatever, in terms of knowing who your students will be, who could write for Wikipedia in a reliable, accurate way?
Yeah, that's a good question. Even though the PhD students were more eager to contribute, I thought the master's level students did okay. And our master's level students oftentimes are going out as clinicians. And so they need to be able to take really complex concepts and describe it into a non-scientific language. So even at that MS level, they need to be able to evaluate the literature and make those kinds of clinical statements. So I don't know if I would keep them out. I think they learned a lot from the PhD students too. Yep, I'm going over time. Thank you. to
That's
stop?
yeah.